Well, well, who's going to ask the first question after that? Can we keep them brief, and can you just introduce yourself, and maybe we take 3 at a go? Are you going to be good with that, Stephen?
Sure.
Okay.
My name is Rendeavour. I used to be MD of SOCFINAF, so I know the story, and I'm involved in the DRC project with a co-investor, so I can guarantee this is a serious group. And what they do, what they say they do. But I have a question. I read the Kenyan press, because on the internet it's very accessible, and I regret there is often a confusion between Tatu City and COFINAF. And Stephen, when you say this crew, as you said, have taken land from Tatu City, is it physically land in Tatu City, or is it something else? Because otherwise, why should I invest in a land, Tatu City, which is under, and every time you read that in the press, every time there is this confusion, and I think it should be corrected. Yes.
Stephen, if you due diligence on partners, if someone like you found partners of this nature, how do the rest of us, small fry, figure out, who we partner with? So that's something, and obviously you are in Russia. I mean, you know, I know, we know. I mean, I understand that's one of the toughest places to be. So, that's my question. What should one do to avoid such partners?
Yes.
Okay. Alice teaches at USIU and is a regular.
Yeah, thank you very much for such an insightful analysis of Kenya's investment climate. And if you look at the World Economic Forum in Cape Town that was done last week, there was a graph that was shown in terms of national competitiveness. And Kenya was actually falling in bar 1, which means that we are still at the factor level. And if you look at the Porter's diamond of factors of the things that we need to improve on, we are still very low on the ones that actually work on efficiency and innovation.
Yes.
And there are others that are like chance, but mainly government. What can we do to actually make sure that we move from the basic factor conditions to advanced factor conditions and really improve overall climate? Because even this afternoon there was a tweet that people now prefer Ethiopia. I've worked in Ethiopia a bit, and when I was in Ethiopia 2 years ago, I was just seeing massive development. And I'm not surprised seeing the negligible FDI flows comparative to GDP. What can we do differently?
So Etienne, that was a very good and actually very helpful question, because when I was speaking of Tatu, I was really referring to Tatu and COFINAF. And the land, so Tatu was 1,000 hectares, and then we have another 3,000 hectares. So the land that has been stolen is actually from COFINAF. The court action, the first court action and the second court action are against Tatu and COFINAF. So the court action is intended to tie some up in knots with all those assets. Very good question about the due diligence. There's a lot of defensive things I could say about that. We should have been more careful. Obviously, 2 of these gentlemen are very well known in Kenya. One is the former head of the central bank. The other has a very high business profile. Nevertheless, we should have done more homework. And interestingly, subsequent investors coming into the project who did more due diligence than we did uncovered a lot of things about those 2 guys. So I think if one does deep due diligence, which we might have to now, I think there's a lot of information to be discovered about our co-investors. But I think when you're working in early stage frontier markets, you simply can't anticipate all issues and all problems. Due diligence is a limited tool. The much bigger issue is how well equipped are you to deal with problems when they arise, organisationally, culturally, resources, and so on and so forth. I don't think we were as well organised initially because we had other priorities, so that definitely made the situation worse for us. We are now extremely focused and well resourced to solve this problem, and we're in the process of solving it.
So that's a roundabout way of answering that question. Yeah, the improving factor productivity is at the core of improved productivity and higher growth and higher incomes. And it goes back, I think most people would agree, it goes back to that business environment. And when the business environment is so incredibly hostile and the corruption is so extremely bad, you'll have a strong focus on extractive industries and industries where Kenya is there because of its natural advantages, not because it's a preferred place to do business. I think you have a lot of things going for you in Kenya, and I'm not just saying that to be polite. You've got a very robust democracy. You've got a very healthy and independent press, which is a disciplining factor. The democracy and civil society have to move to the next stage to clean up the system. And the World Bank isn't going to do it. The IMF's not going to do it. No super benign president is going to fly in from Singapore and do it. Kenyan society and Kenyan business community is going to do it. And you're going to do it through standing up and fighting and changing the ethics and the values and accepted practice step by step in a very grassroots fashion. There's no reason you can't do that, but you have to do it. Because the difference between being a success story and a failure over the next 25 years is absolutely massive. Africa's time has arrived. The wind is at your back. But if you don't use that opportunity, the opportunity cost is truly tragic in magnitude.
You've had lots of challenges in your career. You've been in Moscow, known as the Kiwi oligarch. I remember, that was probably one of the most volatile markets one could ever exist in. How does this challenge rank amongst all those challenges that you've had before? Is this a big challenge or is this a little one?
As I say, I don't think we're as well, going back to the second question, I don't think we were as well organised. And I think that caused some complacency or misplaced hopes with some of our opponents. Once we're organised, we've had to deal with these kinds of issues dozens of times on much bigger assets, much more sophisticated and much more dangerous people. So, for better or worse, if you want to build on-the-ground businesses in frontier markets, you have to be able to deal with these issues with your own hands. So we're very comfortable that we'll solve this, and we'll solve it in a very satisfactory way. It's just a matter of doing the work that needs to be done.
Good evening, my name is Martina Capel. I run a company called True North Leadership, and I work with value-based leadership and action. And another discussion I've had recently is how do we do crisis management? Because very often we talk about crisis management, but we don't know until we're in a deep crisis. And it seems to me like you could have been in many crises in your life. And I would like to hear, how do you connect this with ethics and values? Because I think ethics, values is really, in my opinion, the way to go. And I'd like to hear it from somebody like you, that it's actually also a way of making money. It's not just something that we can talk about and lose money on it.
Good evening. My name is Dhiren Chandaria. Stephen, I've got an interesting question. And you may not be able to answer because of the legal side of it. What is it that they're asking for? with 2 shares.
Dhiren had some challenges of his own in the previous administration.
Hi, good evening. My name is Esther. I think I have 2 questions. I don't know if you already said it or maybe it already passed me before, like after you started. Why the name Tatu? Why Tatu City? Why that name? And my second question is, I don't know what inspired you, because as we're growing up as young people, how did you just sit down and decided like Kenya and all these African countries? What was behind your mind? I would really like to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Raphael Okoth from Spillbox Media. So thank you very much, Mr. Jennings, for the insightful presentation. And my question to you is, how was the new constitution impacted on your on the modus operandi of Tatu City?
So thank you for the question on ethics and values. You know, first, I'm not going to be a hypocrite. First and foremost, we're business people. First and foremost, we are trying to make money. But when you go to somewhere very challenging and you make your life there, or you put yourself into a 20-year project where there's no exit, you better have some very deep belief in what you're doing. And personally, if it was just about making money, I wouldn't have that level of belief. You know, I've made a lot of money before, perhaps. So to do a project like this, you have to be, you know, very, very deeply, you have to really believe in what you're doing. And I think we're just lucky that we're at this confluence of an area where we can make money by doing something that's extremely important. Because we just don't, and that's because no one else wants to do it. But because no one else wants to do it, it makes it commercially interesting. And the other aspect is, if you're going to be there for somewhere for 20 years, and I lived in Russia for 20 years, so I know what I'm talking about. I lived there. You've got a huge vested interest in the system changing. And whether it's developing the securities market or the regulatory framework or the quality of the judicial system, you're very aligned, selfishly, with trying to improve the system. And when you've lived in places where you've seen massive change, you know the system can change. When you haven't lived through that, it's hard to really believe it. So when you've got that belief and you've got that incentive, you really do want to try and change the system and improve it. And it's just logical for us to do that. In terms of what are they asking for, you know, I've never been extorted in my life. I'm not about to be extorted. The other side have made dozens of approaches over the years. I've never once talked to them. I've never once asked what they want, and I'm not about to start. And they can stick their claims in some dark place, but I'm not interested in. In terms of inspiration, as I said, Africa is just following the global emerging market story. It's benefiting from the same trends: the flow of technology, the breakdown of ideology, the flow of ideas, the flow of capital, the flow of people. And the later you start in that process, the faster you can go. That's not a difficult thing conceptually, but the baggage that a lot of people have, most people are deeply prejudiced. So when I went to Russia, when I moved there, the nickname for our group in the flash offices in Canary Wharf was the Smellies, because those sophisticated Europeans, they thought Russians smelt because they didn't have a shower every day. So they looked down their profound noses at Russians. So it was kind of obvious to me Russia was going to develop. But when you start with that amount of prejudice, you can't see the opportunity. The unfortunate thing with Africa is there's a whole industry which is specialised in brainwashing the world about how bad the problems are in Africa and how intractable they are. And that industry has done Africa a massive disservice. Because even when you give investors the facts, they have this huge, it's breaking down now, but for a long time they had this huge barrier. And they'd say things like, well, what about Zimbabwe? Yeah, well, it's one of 50 countries. So the conceptual side is very clear, and then you just need to have an open mind. And then it's so clear and so obvious, in my view anyway. The new constitution, the devolution, yes, we have to take the county, our relationship with the county and the governor is more important. We have to work more closely with them. So it's probably in that regard that we've seen some marginal change. And why Tatu? 3, live, work, play. I think that's why we chose Tatu.
You want to come back on the question?
Stephen, in 1950, somebody has the same vision as you had. This was investor, French investor, in Eastern Asia, Malaysia, Indonesia, and in big palm oil and rubber plantation. And with the Second World War, it was a big fear that this country will turn communist. So they decide to invest in East Africa, and they send their manager with a big check, and the guy he arrived in Mutega Country Club. It didn't wait long, he saw people wanting to sell coffee farms. And he started buying coffee farms to make Sokfinaf. And Tatu is the 3rd farm that he bought in 1950. And he didn't know, the poor guy died a long time ago, that by giving this name will live forever. Thank you.
My name is Kara Winena. I'm a communications consultant. And Stephen, you've been a lot, or rather you've been through a lot of war. My question is, how has our judiciary been? Some pluses, some minuses overall for you. Is it helped you or made things worse? And then how does our judiciary rate with all the other African markets that you're operating in? Thank you.
James Tooley, Newcastle University and various school chains around the world. I loved your stories of the police coming and trying to disrupt you. I was recently arrested at 1 a.m. and thrown in prison in India. It took me 4 months to get out because, again, we're talking against government's involvement in education. So I empathize greatly with that, but I see a huge opportunity. Your cities, they need schools and education, but they've got to have a curriculum which emphasizes the rule of law, all these things that somehow get missed in the curricula today. So that's a tremendous opportunity now. I can see what you talked about. I was going to ask about the judiciary. Assume, therefore, the judiciary. You mentioned democracy and the press as good things. I assume the courts were not great, and I assume the police were not great either.
Just put our experience to one side. So obviously we know a lot of the major business people, middle-sized businesses. We have a lot of business partners. So we swap notes. Have you had similar experiences? So very, very powerful, successful business people here end up in court for years and years and years. And again, if you look at the breakdown of ease of doing business, there's a judicial component, and Kenya's score, it's shocking. For some reason, and I have done business in 25 African countries, so I can compare. For some reason, this tool of using the judiciary as a business instrument, it's more pronounced here than in the other markets we operate. I don't know why that is. And even other countries, like Nigeria, where in ease of doing business they're on a par with Kenya. You don't resolve issues by going to court or creating spurious legal action. So it's a major, major drag on investment here. And it's one of the first things you have to fix if you want to get total factor productivity going the way it needs to be going. On education, I couldn't agree more.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Becky. I just wanted you to clarify a lot more about the international court system and how you're pursuing justice in that.
Hello, everyone. I am Zinzi. First of all, let me say a very big congratulations to Stephen and his team. One, for bringing Tatu City to Kenya. They could have chosen to go anywhere else in Africa, but you guys chose to come to Kenya. And well done for sticking up for your project and what you believe in. My question is, I'm looking around and there are quite a few young people. What would your advice be to Africa's youth? Because to be honest, we are the next spearheaders when it comes to leadership in Africa. So what can we do different from our forefathers and mothers so we can bring development to our continent? Thanks.
Great question.
My name is Clement, and the last time I checked, the Nyaga family, I hope this is Nyaga from the influential, is it founding minister in our government? Is it that same family? So the last time I checked, the family, or somebody from the family was claiming ownership of USIU. I don't know if I'm right. Yes, and Vimal Shah, arguably is the richest Kenyan, owning Bitcoin alongside so many other companies, and these are wheeler dealers. People who are very politically, connected and very powerful. So my question to you is, do you think you have goodwill from the major political players? You know, going all the way to the presidency, because the project is in the backyard of the current president. And in your speech, you gave him quite some accolades insofar as fighting corruption is concerned. But to me, that passed out as a strategy. You know, so, yeah, it passed out as a strategy. So what do you think? Are there more some political entrenched interests which are at play here, or insofar as that is concerned, the coast is clear? Thank you.
Yes, so in terms of the international courts, so having been in a couple of dozen of these kinds of situations, normally there's a legal limit that is domestic and there's a legal limit that is international, because crooks normally like to have their assets owned offshore. And people who are used to extortion, intimidation, and worse things locally, they're used to playing by local rules. But they forget that they have a foot sitting somewhere else. So, for example, these shareholders own their assets through Mauritius, and the company's debt is all structured through Mauritius. There's nothing to do with Kenya. Some of those agreements have arbitration provisions in other jurisdictions. So the days where you could just hide and play dirty pool in Kenya, I'm sorry, they're over. The other element is these kinds of people, they start off building their business and behaving to a very, very low standard, and then they want to go into the international capital markets. They go around the world, they talk a big game, they talk about how they're promoting transparency and openness, but they forget that they have to behave consistently or they're going to be pulled up for that. So that creates enormous scope for bringing an international dimension, and a dimension that will not go away, into a dispute like this. I think the opportunity for the youth, it is the future. It's a cliche, but it's absolutely true. Africa is changing faster than anywhere else in the world, possibly faster than anywhere else in the world has ever changed. And it's partly or largely being driven by generational change at different levels. A new generation of leaders in so many countries, without a military background, without ideological baggage. But personally, I much more believe in the totally new generation of individuals who just want their government to be accountable, who want proper social services, who want people to pay taxes. Because the power of that is so much greater in a democracy like Kenya, and it's so much more sustainable. So I think the youth, the new generation, you have so much more power and influence than you realise. And it's a power that in the end no one can fight, as long as you stay on your demographic trajectory. And that's the main reason, on a 20-year view, despite whatever happens today, I'm very positive about Kenya. Kenya has to change unless you do a U-turn from democracy, which I just can't see that happening. Do we have goodwill? Well, let me tell you, we have a huge amount of goodwill from normal Kenyans and normal business people. And really, it's quite humbling the amount of support, moral support and practical support people have offered us, many times where there's no potential gain for them. You have so many good Kenyan business people. You have so many good Kenyan professionals. And most of those people don't want to live in a corrupt, inefficient, poor country. Why would they? They're smart, they know how things could change, they want things to change, and a lot of those people are prepared to help make them change. And again, to me, that's much more important than support from politicians, because support from politicians has a habit of coming and going. And philosophically, we'd much rather rely on support at that level.
Hi, my name is Juvinalis, and I have two concerns. My first concern stems from my affiliation as a research fellow with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Recently, the president of the Global Development Network, Pierre Jacquet, in his concern about structural transformation in Africa, and I'll probably sound like the devil by mentioning this. It's one of the groundworks by Mr. Vimal Shah. He says that the threat of gentrification outweighs the benefits that will result from Tatu City. How do you think he has any basis for that? And my second concern stems from my affiliation with Sichangi Partners Advocates from a legal perspective. I mean, you've just mentioned that in your investment in Africa, 25 years, the judicial system in Kenya ranks as the lowest in all those countries. Do you have the confidence? Do you have the confidence to proceed with the project? Do you think it has the framework to address your issues? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Wango Ngunjiri. I just have one question that has always been on my mind every time I hear Tatu City being mentioned, and that is the location. You know, this is fertile area of the country. Wasn't there any other location that you could have found that was, you know, not that fertile? Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Nelson. I would like to ask, I think there is an elephant in the room which he did not mention. What about the public, the court of public opinion? I think it's you talked about your war and all the big guys. What about the people who are going, the middle class, and the individuals actually who are interested in your project? They don't have a say in that regard?
Well, let me start with the last one first, because what I was trying to say before, I believe in the court of public opinion. I don't believe in running to politicians and thinking that they will solve all our problems. So what I was trying to say is the support we've had from ordinary Kenyans at all levels has been absolutely tremendous. And I think their voice is the most powerful voice. I think far more powerful than most people realise. That's the one on a 20-year view I have confidence in. There's no politician I have confidence in on a 20-year view. In terms of threat of gentrification, yes, there's a school of thought which is very opposed to these planned cities, and there's a body of academic literature which is very opposed to them. Personally, I think that line of thing is extremely dangerous and ill-informed. Our project is not subsidised. It's not taking resources away from another project. It's not taking government resources away. It's building something that wouldn't otherwise be built. And when you're building something for 80,000 people, that's quite a big gated community. So the gated community element might be 5%. When you're building something of that size in Ghana or in Lubumbashi or in Kenya, the great majority of the housing has to be affordable housing because the market just isn't there for upmarket housing. So no, I don't believe in gentrification. I do have a point with the UN. I think that the supranationals, and I saw this in Russia, they are often complicit in supporting people who are actually not doing good for investment. So the UN, it's convenient for you to work with Vimal Shah because of his profile. But I would suggest to you, you need to do the kind of due diligence that we should have done. And maybe you'll be forced now to do that due diligence. Because when Vimal Shah associates with the UN, that's giving him a legitimacy which he definitely doesn't deserve. And part of civil society is making the public aware of those kinds of issues. Are we thinking of giving up because of the court system? No. Let me just give you one anecdote. When I went to Russia, private ownership was illegal. So there was no private ownership of anything in the entire country. no business asset of any kind, entrepreneurship, you would go to jail for that. So I didn't go to Russia because I liked what they had. I went to Russia because I thought they would change. You don't have a good judicial system, but it is going to change. And it's going to change because of the voice of normal Kenyans, and Kenyans standing up one by one, step by step, very messy long-term process, pushing, agitating for change, supporting politicians who want to modernize and change. And if I didn't think that, I wouldn't have come here in the first place. And that's what I have tremendous confidence in.
Good evening.
Hello.
My name is Charles. I just have 3 questions for you. First and foremost, you realize that the initiative you're trying to have is to benefit humanitarian and also to create employment for Kenyans. But up to now, not even one Kenyan has gone onto the street to demonstrate for your initiative. What is your backup plan on that? Secondly, you realize you are dealing with big fish. The names you are mentioning, to any one of us here, they are big names. My question to you, my second question, what is your plan B, just in case they wrestle you down? My third question, you realize you are now in war with the immigration, with the police. You never know, you are now again in war with the thugs. What of if you are deported or you lose your life? Does it mean that the dream for Tatu shall die? Thank you.
My God. That's it. Whoa. Whoa.
Good evening. My name is Steve. And my question might not be very relevant. But I would like to ask Mr. Stephen. When we look in our high schools, there are so many times we go for the Science Congress and all those things. And there are numerous of them that happen every year in Kenya. But all the time we just have the ideas and all that. And we never get the way forward for that. So is there a way that you can try to help, or you can advise us as Kenyans on how we can be able to put together systems and individuals who are willing to take up these projects? Because we have very good ideas from our high school students in the science congresses, but they never materialize. And even in our campuses, people doing their projects, but they just do their projects to pass the exams and go home. So what difference can we make on that as Kenyans? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brian.
Brian.
Mr. Jennings, considering the global explosion of population, and more so in Africa, and the relative difficulties that come with constructing cities on land, how much longer do we have before investors start considering cities on the sea, seasteading, and ocean cities? Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Steve. I'm a Nigerian. My name is Obi, and I think I should market Nigeria to you. If Kenyans will not allow you to build your city, Lagos alone has 2.2 million shortages of houses. Why don't you please come to Lagos and build? Thank you.
I think you're already building in Lagos. Yeah.
My name is Corazon. My question is about the environment. I am concerned that as it is, Nairobi and the other cities we have in Kenya are increasingly becoming polluted. So we are adding another city to a country that does not have the proper framework to ensure that the environment is taken care of. So what measures have you put in place to ensure that Tatu City is not another problem to the environment? Thank you.
I'd like to take the second to last one first. I'm a massive fan of Lagos, of a number of businesses there. We have a huge project in Abuja, which is an absolutely beautiful site. And we have recently signed a PPP with the Lagos State Government to build a city in the Lekki free zone on the Lekki Expressway. And in many years of doing business in Nigeria, I've never had these kinds of issues. So it's been a great environment for us. But going back to the start, yeah, we want to harness the court of a public opinion is the final arbiter, in my opinion. And as I said before, I don't think we did a very good job initially of establishing ourselves and building the right presence and the right connections, and we can only blame ourselves for that. And as part of that, we didn't explain clearly enough, loudly enough, early enough who we are, what we're doing, what we stand for. We're trying very hard to correct that because we do think that that's a very, very, very powerful medium, particularly in Kenya. Yeah, I don't regard these guys as particularly big or challenging. Some of the people I had to do business with in Russia were many, many times more successful, wealthier, more powerful, and very dangerous. So I don't see this as that daunting a challenge, frankly. Immigration police, well, it's not the police services. It's not the immigration. If you go to the immigration and ask for my file, they don't have one. So if you go to the police and ask for a police report on why they were at our offices today, you're not going to find one. So it's not the system, it's some rogue individuals who are being co-opted by someone to try and irritate us, which is quite childish. It's like a fly buzzing around, no more than that, because it doesn't change anything. So a lot of this is a childish game of sort of sandpit psychology. So unless you're susceptible to that, it doesn't have any impact. Yeah, the whole issue of jobs for students and graduates, you know, that is the real sin that is being committed by people who, for their own benefit, forget about this situation, just think generally. Everybody who is doing things to damage the investment climate and increase corruption, they are responsible for those people not having sufficient job opportunities, income opportunities. They're responsible for the health issues. They are responsible for the insecurity in Kenya, by the way.
Why?
Because in my opinion, if Kenya is a middle-class society with a security system with very high levels of integrity, it would be very difficult to have the kind of terrorist situation that you have today. So all of us, and particularly Kenyans, have got to say, that is the price you are imposing on us. And that's why we're going to stand up and fight you. And because we're here for 20 years, yeah, obviously we'd rather not have a fight. But we're going to. Because we think it's in our interest, we think it's the right thing, and we will do what it takes, and as long as it takes, to win that fight. And hopefully in a very marginal way, that will send a signal. You know, don't hassle foreign investors. The population explosion, cities under the sea. You know, there's a huge body of literature on what efficient things cities are. You do have to house your population. Cities are the most efficient way of doing that. In Africa, you have all the resources in the world. You have huge amounts of unutilized land. You don't have a land shortage of any kind. 55% of the uncultivated arable land in the world is in Africa. So you've got tremendous resources that you can harness now, in my opinion, much more efficiently than have been the case in the past. Which kind of leads on to the environmental question. Again, if you're building a whole city from scratch, it gives you the opportunity to use absolute state-of-the-art technology, whether that's water recycling, efficient homes, efficient power devices, and to harness that in a way, if you're doing piecemeal solutions, it's very, very difficult. As far as Tatu City is concerned, it is designed to be compliant with World Bank and IFC environmental standards. That includes 35% green and wet areas, and all potentially polluting elements of all of our projects are designed and they are compliant with IFC World Bank environmental standards.
What was Vladimir Putin like?
Hi, my name is Ronak. I like to think as an investor, and I think that's why most people are here. So if you could probably give us an indication as to the levels of risks that you had taken to come in, what has changed then, and as investors, what risks we will be taking and what returns we should be expecting.
Do you mean generally or in respect?
Yeah, any sort of risks that we are taking as by putting our money.
Hi, my name is Deto.
Oh, hi, Deto.
My question, I'd like to know what is your broad impressions in regards to the current African integration in it accelerating such cities as Tatu and being replicated in other states in Africa? Thank you.
Yeah, the advantage that you have, it's not that Mr. Putin isn't here, it's that you have civil society. Russia does not have civil society. Sadly, Russia is still living in the shadow of totalitarian society. So it doesn't have a civil society response the way you do here. So your media is much freer. It's much more vociferous. The media in Russia is totally neutered. So it's the change in civil society. It's the demands of civil society, the demands of the youth someone spoke about. That's why your opportunity is so great. Sadly, Russia at the moment doesn't have that opportunity. It's a very big difference. What risks you will be taking in Tatu? Well, if I look at who's doing a lot of business in Tatu and who's not, so the industrial players here are very active in Tatu. So quite a number of your largest industrial...
Such as?
Dormans, Kimfei, the guys who do the Heineken, and a number of other big players are building very large, and multinationals, by the way, are building very large, state-of-the-art industrial facilities, often designed to service all of East Africa. And they are up to $100 million projects in their own right. So those investors are very sophisticated and they're very long-term. Obviously, they are taking a judgment that they can trust us to protect the integrity of the asset and to build the infrastructure. The part of the project that is much more challenging is the retail and residential side. Because understandably, retail and residential investors, they don't have that level of sophistication and they're not able to look through sort of the short-term turbulence and challenges. As far as replicating Tatu, we are building 7 cities. This is the only one where we have those kinds of issues. And as I mentioned, those projects, there's 2 in Ghana, 1 in Takoradi, 1 in Accra, 2 in Nigeria, 1 in Lagos, and 1 in Abuja, 1 in DRC in Lubumbashi, and 1 in Lusaka in Zambia. And they range from 80% complete, as in the case of Roma Park in Lusaka, to projects which have just started in the last few weeks, such as at Lekki in Lagos. So, the concept is working extremely well, and people are going to copy this concept. That's the other thing. People will copy Tatu, and they'll build other smaller projects. So maybe we can close 8% of the housing deficit, but maybe the people who copy us, they can close another 15, because it's a very easy thing once you've seen it to copy it.
I've got to let Maurice have his... Maurice, you have the final question.
Okay, basically my name is Maurice. My question to you is that the issue with Kenya's high housing deficit boils down to one thing, affordability. One thing that I want to ask you directly, looking at the figures thrown around Tatu City, is how affordable, what is affordable, like in the Kenyan scenario, in your own opinion? Then the second one, what do you think is the biggest challenge in real estate, the whole issue of affordability and all that? Is it the issue of land? Is it the issue of financing? Or is it the issue that is now giving you a lot of stress?
Yeah, so this issue of affordability, it's the key issue. So right now we can go down to $25,000 a unit. So that's not the bottom of the market. It's in the middle of the market. But that's getting your housing costs way down. The key is scale and in a sense industrializing. It's trying to make a house the way you make a car. So everything is extremely standardized. So you need big scale to be able to do that. We haven't cracked that. We haven't seen anyone else who has cracked that. But there's an enormous commercial opportunity to build high quality homes at even lower prices. So rather than seeing that as a problem, I see that as a huge opportunity, because that is the market. So if you can get your unit costs down through the use of the right technology and building materials and standardization, you have a big, big business opportunity. So we're down to 25. We aspire to get much lower because of the business opportunity associated with that.
Thank you, Stephen. Oof. I'm really grateful you came and you gave it to us straight, and I think you gave us all a lot to consider, and I hope that many of the people in this audience will be your supporters as you move forward and try and make a dramatic change here in Kenya. And we wish you all the success with your project, and Stephen, thank you for being so forthright as I knew you would be. Thank you.